Well, it's been a busy week here at Solid Word Ministries, and we're excited to be here again with SOAR. We will start in just a minute. I'll tell you some of the things that have been happening around here. Today and this week, Alan Snare has been here in the office, and he's been doing a lot of printing. We printed this tract here. Is evolution or creation? Evolution or creation? Right, which is right? Well, nobody was there except that we have some books and many things that go back many years. And so what does the Bible say? That's the point of this. And so later on this is going to be cut and folded, and it'll be a good tract to be passed out to someone. And you might be interested in ordering that for your ministry. Then also, this Bible dictionary has been printed this week. It's quite full. Has a lot of things in it, and it's exciting to see people. That's one of the most popular things that we have here. People are reading their Bibles and they're saying, how do I understand those words? Because many of the words are old and hard to understand, and today people don't read very well, it seems, and so reading those are a little bit tough, and so that's good. And then also we've been making DVDs and making these get ready so that people can enjoy them and have those. And so we're making things for your deaf ministry. Okay, give me just a second. We're going to change here and we will get started. And welcome to SOAR. I'm John Barr. And tonight, we're not going to have preaching. It's going to be a little bit different tonight. With SOAR, there will be preaching, there will be teaching, there will be fun things. Some things are going to be short, some things are going to be more long. There will be some history, there will be some lessons. There's a ladies' lesson that we are planning, and we will be posting it soon. And deaf testimonies, people explaining the story of their life, how they became saved, and how God gripped their heart for salvation. And so we have many things that we're going to be teaching. Tonight, the question is, do deaf people understand you? So as a hearing person, now I'm hearing, and I'm speaking to hearing people out here, and I'm signing. Some hearing people have never seen somebody sign and talk at the same time. And the reason I'm signing this is so that deaf people can see what I am saying about deaf people and make sure that it's right. In fact, as I'm talking here tonight, maybe deaf people would like to put their comments down below and verify, support what is being said, and that'll be good. The topic tonight is, do deaf people understand you hearing person? But before we get started, I'd like to share something that's going on really soon. We call this ASL Institute, ASLI, and Deaf Bible Conference. Now, this is an exciting program. This has been going on for about 20 years now. This is a picture from last year. There are deaf people here, there are hearing people here, and that meeting was in Pennsylvania, and it was a good time together. Why do we have ASLI? It's for hearing people to come and learn sign language or improve their sign language. So some people will come and they don't know signs at all, and they'll learn A, B, C. And then other hearing people will know signs and they can sign and interpret, but we're going to help them to improve in their signing skills. And so deaf people, encourage your hearing church interpreter to come to ASLI. We have it in Georgia and Pennsylvania this year. And then the Deaf Bible Conference at the same time. Hearing people are over here learning signs and improving their signs. Deaf people are over here, and there's a preaching and teaching time, and there's a lot that happens. There's fun things that happen. It's very interesting, and it's a time of learning and fun and fellowship. And so plan to come to ASLI this summer. Then also, one more thing, I want to let you know we're making plans and people now sending in their registrations for our Israel trip, Deaf Tour of Israel. All of it will be interpreted, and really last time we went, we asked the people that were talking, we said, please slow down, make sure that the deaf can see you, and then look around and then see you, and it was wonderful. And so we had a really exciting time last time, and this will be in March of 2020. We'll be visiting a lot of places. It's 10 days there in Israel. And I'll put this up here so you can see it. You may want to write this down, and I believe we're going to have it also posted down here in the comments, so you can just click on it. You can go there, you can read more about it, and we want to welcome you deaf people to come with us. And maybe there's some hearing people that know sign language, and you want to come and fellowship with deaf people in the country, the place where Jesus walked, and many other things happened there. So come and visit with us there in Israel next year. You need to register fairly soon so we can plan for the airlines and everything that's going to be happening. We have a limit of 30 people. So please visit this and click down below and go and visit Israel with us. Now the question, do deaf people really understand you? It's interesting. As we talk with deaf people, we can ask the question, did you understand your interpreter? And sometimes, oh yeah, good, clear, interpreter, clear, yes. And sometimes we ask the question, they go, oh yeah, that means no. That means maybe. That means sometimes hearing people sign words, only words. Now tonight I'm signing what we call is SIMCOM, and the way that I'm communicating right now is not full ASL. It's not full American Sign Language. This is let's call it a compromise between the hearing world language and the deaf world language, okay? So it's a compromise, and hearing people will notice that the English sometimes is a little messed up. And deaf people will notice, what did he say? Sign language was messed up. And I understand the compromise that happens and how it's weak English and weak ASL, and we understand that. So normally when you're communicating with deaf people and you're interpreting in church, you're not using SIMCOM, but you're using sign language. You're listening, hearing people are listening, okay, and then they're interpreting, they're signing. In the Bible, and I said this is not a message, but there is a point, something to be understood here in the Bible, in the book of Acts. Here we have a story of Philip and a man from Ethiopia. And here Philip was running alongside this man from Ethiopia. He's reading the Bible, the book of Isaiah, and he's reading that, and Philip comes up to him and says, do you understand what you are reading? Do you understand what you're reading? And this man from Ethiopia, he says this, he says, how can I understand? Except some man should guide me, show me, explain it to me. And really, since all of time, for all of the ages and ages and ages in the past, people have had miscommunications. That's true. Hearing people that learn sign language, sometimes they want just to sign words. And really, uh, most deaf people tell me that's not clear. And they can catch some of it, but it's not clear. We're going to talk about that tonight. Let me give you one other verse here. And the Bible says in Romans chapter 10 and verse 17, it says, so then faith cometh or happens by hearing. I don't want to sign hearing, and I don't want to sign hearing. It says hearing happens by the Word of God. When a person deaf or hearing reads this and this they understand, that means that the person has heard. And he saw and understood what was being said. A deaf person listens with their eyes. Hearing people are doing this all around. They can hear from behind, they can hear out down there, they can hear everything. A deaf person listens with the eyes, which is straightforward, or this way, but you cannot go like this with the eyes. A deaf person listens with their eyes. That means if a deaf person looks down, they're not understanding what's being interpreted. A funny thing that happened one time, I was with a friend of mine, and we went over to meet a deaf person, and we were standing there at this lady's house, and we were talking, and it was good. And my friend, he was new. He was new, just learning sign language. Just recently had learned signs, and so he was trying to sign himself, and he was signing, and he continued. The deaf lady looked down because her daughter came, and so she was looking to see what happened. He just kept signing. And I said, stop. She's looking down. She's not paying attention to you. For hearing people, it's awkward to stop talking. That's kind of funny, but it is. Yeah, hearing people, they go on and on and on and on and on. If it's quiet, hearing people think it's awkward. Deaf people, when they look down, they're still getting something through their eyes, but here when they look down, then they're missing that. And so hearing people need to understand that deaf people listen through this way with their eyes. If the eyes are not open, are not looking, then there's no understanding. Another example of that, one time we were starting a deaf ministry in a church in South Carolina, and it was in country area, and really it was very nice outside, and so the air conditioner was off, and the church doors were open, and the windows were open, and we were enjoying church and the preaching, and it was good, and all of a sudden a cat came into and walked around in the church. I told you it was country, okay? So this cat was walking around. Well, what do you think happened with the deaf? The deaf stopped watching the boring interpreter and started watching, oh, the cat, oh, like that. And there's nothing to interpret because deaf people listen with their eyes. Another example of that is many years ago when I was learning sign language, there was one man in the church, and he was teaching a class, the Bible class for the deaf. He was teaching on Sunday morning, Sunday school class. And as he was teaching, he was really paying attention to his signs because he was new, recently learned signs. And so he was trying to teach, and his face was concentrating. He was thinking about signs, and his face, it was not smiling. It looked bad. I was sitting back and watching all of this, and a deaf person tapped me, and I said, what? They said, why is he mad? And I said, no, he's not mad, no. And he said, look at him. Look at his face. I said, Ooh, okay. A deaf person listens with their eyes, and so what they see is what happens. Hearing people depend on their ears. Deaf people depend on their eyes. The next idea here is that there's really a need to understand. Hearing people, when you learn sign language, don't try to sign fast. Don't try to copy deaf people and, oh, they, and I'll, and they'll understand me. Oh, they won't. Here's Bob Himes. Bob Himes has been a missionary in the Philippines for many years, and he started deaf ministries all over there in the Philippines. And while he was there, he's taught young people, people that had no schooling. Really, there's some older people that had no schooling. They never went to school, or maybe they graduated from first grade, and the education has improved a lot. But long time ago, and even some people right now, they have no education. In the Philippines, other countries as well. In fact, the World Federation of the Deaf said, and I read before on their website, they said that 80% of deaf people around the world have no access to education. And so Bob Himes says, if they don't understand the way you sign, then change your signs and sign the way they can understand. If they don't understand you, your signs mean nothing. So the goal is to be clear. The goal is to explain and to help people see and understand and be clear. A hearing interpreter really is like a bridge. Over here is the deaf world, and over here is the hearing world. And that hearing interpreter is like the bridge where hearing people can come across the interpreter to the deaf world. And deaf people can come across the interpreter to the hearing world. And so the need is to be clear. One time we were talking to a deaf person, and a friend of mine, he was asking the deaf person to come to church with him. I thought, this is an interesting conversation. And he signed, he said, are you, now with voice, I'll explain and say, with voice, he said, are you going to church now? Which means for the hearing world that do you have a church that you go to? And so the deaf person said, no. And so my friend, he said, so you come to my church. And the deaf lady, she said, no, I go my church. And the hearing person was confused. And I'm sitting here watching this as it unfolds. And so the hearing person says, okay, but are you going to church now? And the deaf person said, no. He says, well, okay, fine. You come to my church and visit. And she said, no. I'll go to my church. And it was real interesting, the difference in sign language. He meant to sign, do you go to church? And later I asked that question, do you go to church? She said, oh, yeah, every Sunday. It's like, oh. He misunderstood because he was signing the words, well, the words that he thought was right, but he did not sign the right signs clear for the deaf person. And she got frustrated with it, and she said, you mean now, Saturday, 2 o'clock afternoon, go to church? And he said, no, tomorrow, Sunday. And it was just a mess. And it was funny because I understood the deaf person does not understand the hearing, and the hearing person does not understand the deaf, and it was just, And so the goal, you need to learn signs so that you can clearly sign what you mean and express that very clearly. That's important when you're interpreting the Bible in church, or you're teaching a Bible class, or you're explaining salvation, or you're trying to even just help a person with something in their life. Maybe you're advising from Bible verses, or maybe you're just a friend talking. Miscommunications can happen. And so the hearing person needs to learn to be clear with their signs and teach the way they understand. This is a shock for many people. Many hearing people think it's skilled at signs and deaf will just come to my church. No, maybe not. Let me explain. In many of our meetings, when I'm standing and I'm preaching, deaf and hearing people are all there, and I'm preaching, and I ask deaf people, I say this, I say, deaf people, would you rather have a really skilled interpreter who doesn't care about the deaf, does not fellowship with the deaf, does not have time with the deaf, or do you prefer another interpreter, their skill is a little bit lower, but they love deaf people? Which? And almost every time, in my experiences, in the times that I've asked that question, deaf people come back and they say, no, the skilled interpreter, no. I would rather have the skilled less interpreter who loves deaf people. And it's really important to understand sign language does not build your deaf ministry. Your skill as a hearing person signing skilled interpreter, that does not build a deaf ministry. I have met certified interpreters who could not interpret in church, and the deaf go, and they fall asleep in church. Why? Because the skilled interpreter, the certified interpreter, was not skilled in interpreting Bible verses and preaching. Deaf people are focused on people. They're just like every person. Hearing people like fellowship with people. You like people who care about you, and who will take time with you, and who will spend time together with you. And so the point is, we should, as hearing people, care about deaf people. In the deaf ministry, there is interpreting. You about have to have interpreting in the deaf ministry. At some point, you've got to make that bridge across from deaf to hearing. And so that bridge is the interpreter. So you have to have interpreters. But also a deaf Bible class is very important. I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. But a deaf Bible class, it's so important so that deaf people can understand. And understand the Bible. And then there's fellowship time outside of church to be with deaf people, really, and then throughout all week long and talking to deaf people and meeting deaf people. That's an important time to focus on deaf ministry. Okay, let's talk about this. When you're interpreting, a deaf person is seeing, and maybe the deaf person will, if you're interpreting clear, the deaf person understand, okay. When in the deaf Bible class, it's a time when deaf people will learn the Word of God. In the fellowship time, it's a time for you, hearing people, to learn deaf ways, to learn deaf culture, to learn deaf, who they are, and to make friends with deaf people. Most deaf people are not interested in coming to church to watch an interpreter. They're interested in being involved in church. They're interested in being, really feeling, can I say this? I don't mean to be offensive, but deaf people are equal with hearing people. They can't hear. That's all. And they are people. They're a person. They're an individual. And hearing people cannot look down and say, they're the deaf. No. And deaf people want to know that you care. And then throughout the week, this is a time when both of you learn. You end up teaching something or saying something or helping a person understand something. And then they're teaching you signs and helping you to improve. And maybe they're teaching you something. Deaf people teach me how to fix things. And oh, you're skilled. Oh, okay. And okay, and then sign language, they explained it. I went home and tried it. Yay, it worked. And so it's a time when you're together. A deaf ministry does not only happen on Sunday morning. Get that. Sign language. It's important for a hearing person to learn the language, the language of deaf people. If you're going to be involved in the deaf community, you've got to learn that language. Now, some deaf people don't want you to be involved. That's their choice. But other people are just hungry for fellowship, and they would like for you to learn sign language and be skilled and communicate with them. By the way, you cannot wait until you're perfect, because no hearing person signs perfect. Maybe if you grew up, your first language was sign language, you're pretty good. But understand, get involved in the language of the deaf people. Understand also that English is a second language for many deaf people. English is their second language. Signs is their first language. Ask you a question. Is this funny? Yes or no? You can vote. Okay? What do you think? I'm not deaf, I'm ignoring you. Is that funny? Yes or no? One time I was at a football game, and a deaf friend of mine, this is many years ago, my deaf friend, he noticed that a person over here had a button on, just a little like a pin, and they put it in there. There's this little button, and it said that. It said, "I'm not deaf, I'm ignoring you." And I said, "Look at that, that's funny." And my deaf friend, he said, "That's not funny. It's not funny." And I said, "Yeah, it's funny. What do you think it says? What does it say? What does it say?" He said, "That means, hey, they do not like deaf people." So I looked at it and I said, how did he understand that? Well, it says, "I am not deaf myself, so you're deaf? I'll ignore you." I thought, whoa. And so reading that in English is to understand, and hearing people, oh, that's funny, oh. But it's not picking on deaf people, but a deaf person could easily misunderstand that. Or any person that speaks English as a second language, a lot of English words and sentences are confusing. And so realize that. We've talked about deaf culture and deaf eyes. They view things through their eyes first. And we're gonna talk a little bit about this now. Maybe a little bit later on we'll have a class about deaf culture so that people can understand, hearing people understand, oh, that's the world of deaf people. Because really, hearing people are way out here and do not understand the cultural aspects of deafness. But just a little bit for right now, talking about deaf understanding you. Deaf people see things, they use their eyes, okay? Deaf people grow up in a world where hearing people are dominant, which means that a deaf person may feel like they have to, okay, the hearing person said that. Today that is changing, but for many years that was the case. And so it's a sad thing, because deaf people can do so much. Deaf people are what we call high context. That means that, let me give you an example of that. They talk in stories. Hearing person says, "Hi, how are you?" Answer, "Fine." Finished. And the conversation is done. But with a deaf person, "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, boy, you know what happened yesterday, blah, 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 blah." And they tell this story and story and story, blah, 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 blah. And the hearing person is going, "Oh, well, I didn't mean tell me all of the story." But the truth is, deaf people tell the stories. Today, There was a deaf man that came in, and he told me the story of yesterday, what happened with a police officer. There was a car in the front, and my friend was back here. And in the front, the police officer stopped that car, and they got out and they walked around, and my friend was telling the story. And he was dramatizing the whole story. Like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And a hearing person would just tell it short, and a deaf person will elaborate. And deaf culture tends to do that. And then deaf people want to participate. If you have a deaf Sunday school class, don't hearing person stand up and teach the lesson, blah, 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 teach, okay, I'm finished, okay, let's go to church. No, you need to have participation and involvement and feedback and all of that. Speaking of a deaf class, build your deaf ministry with a deaf class. Don't have just interpreting, and that's all. No, if you have one deaf person, that's enough people to teach a deaf class. A little bit later in Eagle SOAR, you're going to see the story of Alan Snare. He's now a deaf missionary, and he's been traveling for many years and preaching and teaching. He was one deaf man, and somebody got a burden for one person and began to explain the gospel to him, and he didn't understand them. And another person explained, and he didn't understand them. And later there was an interpreter, and he was age 20 when he first saw an interpreter in his church. And that time, he got saved. He trusted Jesus Christ as his Savior. He began to pray, and the things, what Alan Snare prayed for happened, and God answered his prayers. And now he's been preaching for these many years. How many people were in his deaf class? When it started, there was one. Is it worth it to teach one? Well, you can ask the many, 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 many people who have accepted Jesus Christ because Alan taught them about salvation. Yes, it's worth it. Yes, for one person, it's worth it. And so build with a deaf class. For a deaf class, you need to have a whiteboard, something to write on. Now here, when I'm teaching, we don't have something to write on because it's hard to see from the camera, and then also you don't want to see the back of the head. I understand that, okay? But here we put things on the screen here, and you can see them, pictures, and holding up things to explain. Oh, how wonderful! And then have a presentation screen like this. Take your time. Take your time. Go slow. Don't hurry. Okay, finish. No, take your time. If a person has a question, okay, what? And then stop teaching and wait. Okay, and explain. And maybe that person, you're explaining it and you're not explaining it clear. And another deaf person says, whoa, and he comes up and he explains it, and they go, oh, I understand deaf. Hearing, I don't understand. That has happened many times. And so take your time. The point is understanding clear. Do they understand you? If they don't understand you, then change your ways so that they can understand. I'll give you a principle here. If they did not understand you, that means you did not communicate. You were not clear, and you need to be clear. Train deaf people to get involved, to help and to do in your church. If a person has qualifications, if they're able, if they're willing, let them serve. Deaf people can collect the offering. Deaf people can welcome people to come to church. Deaf people can pray in church. Deaf people can sing in church. They need a hearing backup, either voice or a tape, but they can sing in the church. They can do drama in the church. They can. Some deaf people are qualified to preach, and it can be a blessing to many hearing people. Deaf people can stand and tell a testimony. Deaf people can say prayer requests in the church. And so teach deaf people to be involved in the church. Don't have a hearing interpreted only ministry. I'll say this, we're getting close to the end. No person is saved without the gospel, without Jesus Christ. Deaf people need to understand the salvation that I have. That you, if you're saved, you have Jesus Christ. That should be shared with other people. Don't hold it in. Don't say, well, they're deaf. They need that spirituality just like a hearing person. There are many hearing people that deny Jesus Christ. And there are many deaf people that deny Jesus Christ. But they should have the opportunity. They should have the understanding of Jesus Christ and who he is and what he has done to save them. So the point here is clear understanding. I have something funny up here, and it says this: Doctor, please use clear words so I can understand. Have you ever gone to the church? Have you ever gone to the doctor? And you go to the doctor and you say, okay, what's wrong with me? And the doctor, he said, blah, 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 blah. He says these words that are like this long. Has that happened to you before? And it's like, I don't understand. And you feel like you want to just say, doctor, make the words small. Tell me clear. What do you mean? And hearing person, when you're interpreting in church, you need to do that. You need to make the words small. You need to sign it clearly. You need to listen and interpret and not just sign the words. As you hear, and you sign the words, don't do that. Interpret so that deaf people will understand. In fact, if we go to the Bible, it says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 19. It says, I had rather speak 5 words with my understanding, or with them understanding me, that by my, signs, I changed the verse, that by my signs I might teach others also, than to speak 10,000 signs in an unknown thumb or hand. If you sign only the words and a person goes, I didn't get it, then our signing fails. We need to sign clearly. We need to sign clearly so deaf people will understand. When you're teaching, never teach the class of people. Always teach the individuals that are in that class. Deaf people are individuals. Individuals. You can't say all deaf hate hearing people. All deaf, all deaf. You can't say that. You can't say that about any group of people. All of them are that way. No, they're individuals, and they need individual communication, individual learning, and so very much more. So let me get close to the end here. Interpreting. What is interpreting? Interpreting. Interpreting means to give the sense, to explain clearly, to help understanding. It's a bad example, but I'm gonna explain it anyway. A child comes up to you and they say, Mommy, what did the preacher say in church? And Mommy does not say the words again the same like the preacher. Well, he was talking about the incarnation of Christ. It's like, oh. The child didn't understand. So Mom changes it and explains it clearly so that the child understands. That's what you call interpreting. Now, deaf people are not children. That's not what I mean. But the point is language. Language. Take the language and make it clear in the other language, and that's interpreting. Same thing for Spanish or other language. I was in a Spanish church last year, and I was preaching, and I didn't say something funny, but all of a sudden, all of the people, they laughed. And I thought, my interpreter. And I trusted my interpreter because I knew the interpreter would help them understand the point. And so the interpreter said something that I did not say, but it was effective. And I was effective because the interpreter was effective. And so interpreting is to give the understanding. And then to transliterate means to change the words into similar like signs. If you have a word that has a meaning, let me give you an example. I like tech, okay? Computers, whatever your sign is, computers. And you want to say the word that's written down in an advertisement that explains about how big the computer is. It says a hard drive. I've seen somebody sign hard drive. Hard drive. And all the deaf people are laughing right now because hard is difficult and drive means a car. Drive a car. So it's a hard drive, but that's not what it means. And so if you're signing hard drive, you talk about the computer. The hard drive is this, you explain it. Hard drive, HD, and you find the right sign. But if we transliterate, then it's a little bit more weak. Now, we're talking about church interpreting. We're not talking about educational interpreting or other interpreting. But in church interpreting, it is very important that you interpret. Sometimes you'll need to transliterate, yes, but most of the things you'll need to interpret. Here's a shocking statement, and that's this. It's the pastor's responsibility to communicate clearly. The pastor has the responsibility to plan the message so that all the people will understand. Then it is the interpreter's responsibility to take that, to understand it, and to interpret it more clearly so that the deaf people will understand it very clearly. I was in a RID workshop, a Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf workshop, and one of the nationally recognized interpreters said this: our job is to make it even for the deaf. And sometimes we make it more even. And that's true. And so, getting close here, and here's the point. There comes a time when, as a hearing person, you stop saying, look at me and my signs. Yeah. Just stop. Don't do that. Don't say, it's all about me and my skill and oh, you didn't like, oh, I'm so sad. Stop it. There comes a time when you say, how then shall they call on him whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? Or we could just say here, how shall they hear without an interpreter? There comes a time when you say, my hands. I want God to use my hands. I take my hands and I give them to God. You come in and you, it's like you are signing through my hands. And help my hands to be clear. Help my face to be clear. Help my body and my turning and all of everything I do. Help it to be clear so that the message goes forth and deaf people understand. So let's ask a question. Do deaf people understand you? Well, maybe some of you are sitting there going, oh, the deaf don't understand me. And you get afraid. Don't stop. Decide you're going to improve your science. decide you're going to learn sign language skillfully. Maybe some of you don't know sign language and you thought, whoa, I did not know any of that. Wow, I'm curious and you want to learn some more. Good. Then come to one of our events and learn some more, and we'd be glad to help and encourage you. So let me say again, the ASLI plan to come to that this summer, and then also visit silentword.org, and there you'll find a lot of things that will be very helpful for you. We are here to serve. Thank you for coming to Eagle SOAR. We will see you again soon.